Alright, today's lesson is on section 2.3. It's about linear functions and slope-intercept form. Okay, this should not be anything new for you. Some of the terminology may be, but the concept is not. Okay, slope is the vertical change over the horizontal change. And this is of a line. Okay. Basically, the shortcut for this is to say it is the slant of the line. Okay. So, using the words vertical change and horizontal change may be new, but the rest of this formula here should not be. Okay. You may have heard this as rise over run. Well, vertical is up and down. Horizontal change is side to side. Okay? So here's your formula. Remember, your y's go up and down, so that's why you take this difference in your y values on the top. Your x values go side to side, which is horizontal, so that's why your x values, or the difference in your x values, is on the bottom. Now, another little part of this is when you subtract your x values, it cannot equal 0. And we'll get to a problem that looks like that in just a few minutes. Okay. So here, for problem 1, they ask us to find the slope between those two given points. Well, what I recommend you do is to stack those points up. Instead of trying to work with them side by side, just stack them up. So I'm going to take the negative 2, 4 and put it underneath the negative 3, 7. And when you do that, these are your x values, these are your y values. Now, we're going to use this formula exactly the way it's written, and then we're going to talk about an alternative way to find that slope. Okay? The formula says, take the second y minus the first y. So my second y is 4, the first y is 7. And then on the bottom, it says that you should do x2 minus x1, or x sub 1 is the way you're supposed to read it. So the second x is negative 2, the first x is negative 3, and that is minus a negative 3. Remember, minus a negative is the same thing as plus a positive. So now, when you simplify those, on the top you get negative 3. On the bottom, you're going to get 1. So the slope of the line between these 2 points is going to be negative 3. Let me get that out of the way there. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. Okay, so negative 3 is your slope. Now, for me, it's just not normal to take the bottom one minus the top one. So here's an alternative to that formula. And this is where I do y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. As long as you subtract your x's and y's in the same order, it doesn't matter which order you do them. So here, when I do the first y minus the second y, it's 7 minus 4 gives me 3. And on the bottom, the first x minus the second x, negative 3 minus negative 2. Again, minus a negative is plus a positive. That's going to give me a negative 1 on the bottom. My slope is still 3. I just went about finding it a little bit differently. And I do it this way because it usually means I don't have to write this step down. I stack my points up and do 7 minus 4, write down my 3, negative 3 minus negative 2, write down my negative 1, and simplify. But whichever way you prefer, you get the exact same thing. So now, let's talk about some special cases. Okay, and this will help you understand that little disclaimer that we had up at the top for our formulas for slope. Okay, if you happen to have 0 over some number, and it doesn't matter what number it is, if you have a 0 on the top of a fraction when you're finding slope, that slope is 0. However, if you have a number on top and 0 on the bottom after you plug into the formula, that is undefined slope. Okay? And it is undefined slope because you cannot divide by 0. So now we'll talk a little bit more about these two when we get to the pictures at the bottom of this page. Okay. So I've got 4 graphs down here at the bottom. I don't know if I can get them all on here at once. Yep, there we go. Okay. So here we're not going to go through the steps of actually finding the slope for these, but I want to talk about what kind of slope they have. And remember, we read a graph just like we read words in a book, from left to right. So if I'm looking at this graph, from left to right, it is going uphill, so it has positive slope. This next graph is going downhill from left to right, so it has negative slope. These 2 graphs at the bottom, these are our 0 and undefined. So how do you know which is which? Well, if I were to pick 2 points on here, those have different x values, but they have the same y values for those ordered pairs. So if I take my y values and subtract something from itself, I get a 0 on top, and then I'm going to get a number on the bottom, which means it is 0 slope. Well, 0 slope is a horizontal line. And the way I remember that is horizontal has an O in it, which kind of looks like a 0. So horizontal has 0 slope. This line over here, however, is vertical. And if I choose 2 points on that line, my x values are going to be the same, but the y's are different. So if I subtract the same x value from itself on the bottom of a fraction, I'm going to end up with a number over 0, which is undefined. Okay. So vertical lines have undefined slope. And I don't really have a trick for remembering that one. When I was learning how to do this, I always remembered that the horizontal and vertical lines, one of those had 0 slope, the other one was undefined. And since I knew that, this trick here, 0 slope, horizontal has an O, told me, that horizontal lines had 0, which means by default, vertical had to have the undefined slope.